monstrous figure emerges from the shadows, eyes bulging with terror, as he sinks his teeth into the lifeless body of his child. Blood drips from his hands, and the scene is so grotesque that it feels like a nightmare brought to life. This is Francisco Goya's Saturn Devouring His Son, a painting so disturbing that it was never meant for public eyes. Yet today, it hangs in Madrid's Prado Museum, leaving viewers haunted and bewildered. The painting draws from an ancient myth. Saturn, fearing a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, consumes each one upon birth. In Goya's rendition, however, the act is not a calculated decision, but a frenzied, horrifying spectacle. Unlike earlier depictions, such as Rubens's version where Saturn appears composed, Goya's Saturn is wild-eyed and unhinged, tearing into his child with primal fury. But why did Goya choose to portray the myth in such a grotesque manner? To answer that, we need to understand the man behind the brush. By the time Goya painted this piece between 1819 and 1823, he was in his 70s, having survived illness, war, and political turmoil. Deaf and disillusioned, he retreated into his home, the Quinta del Sordo, where he created the Black Paintings, a series of haunting images never intended for public display. Saturn Devouring His Son was painted directly onto the walls of his dining room, a private expression of his inner demons. What drove Goya to such darkness? The answer may lie in the turbulent times he lived through. Goya lived through the Napoleonic Wars, the Spanish Inquisition, and the Peninsular War, a period marked by violence and upheaval. Some art historians interpret Saturn Devouring His Son as an allegory for Spain itself, a nation consuming its own people through endless conflict. The painting becomes a mirror, reflecting the horrors of a country in chaos. But could there be a more personal interpretation? Goya had several children, but only one survived to adulthood. Some scholars suggest that the painting represents his fears as a father, or perhaps a manifestation of his own mortality and the passage of time. Saturn, after all, is not just a god, but also a symbol of time, devouring all things, including his own offspring. This interpretation adds another layer of complexity to an already enigmatic work. Interestingly, the gender of the victim in the painting is ambiguous. Some art historians note the curvaceous form, suggesting the figure might be female. This deviation from the myth raises questions. Was Goya making a broader statement about violence, or was this a reflection of his own psyche? The lack of clarity only deepens the mystery, inviting endless speculation. Despite, or perhaps because of its disturbing nature, Saturn Devouring His Son has captivated audiences for centuries. It has influenced countless artists and continues to be a subject of analysis and debate. Its raw portrayal of madness and horror speaks to the darkest corners of the human experience. Goya's Saturn Devouring His Son remains one of the most enigmatic and haunting paintings in art history. Its layers of myth, personal anguish, and historical context create a tapestry of horror that defies simple explanation. Perhaps that's the point. Some images are meant not to be understood, but to be felt, to confront us with the unsettling truths we'd rather ignore. And in that confrontation, we find the true power of art. The painting looms large. Beneath a dim, flickering light, the bodies of fallen gladiators are dragged away, their blood pooling on the floor. In the background, the crowd watches, indifferent, as the victors bask in their glory. But in this painting, nothing is as it seems. This isn't a depiction of ancient Rome. It's a mirror reflecting the agony of the Philippines under Spanish colonial rule. Spoliarium, a masterpiece by Filipino artist Juan Luna, captured a moment so intense it became the rallying cry for a nation on the brink of revolution. But how did a painting displayed at a European art competition ignite the flames of revolt thousands of miles away? The answer lies in the dark symbolism of Luna's work and the power of art to stir hearts, awaken spirits, and shape history. In 1884, the Spoliarium made its debuts at the Exposición Nacional de Bellas Artes in Madrid, Spain. Juan Luna, a young Filipino artist studying in Europe, had already gained some recognition, but this was his magnum opus. The painting was grand in scale, measuring an astounding 4.22 by 7.67 meters. It depicted a dramatic scene of Roman gladiators, whose lifeless bodies are being dragged away from the arena after a deadly contest. But Luna didn't just paint the brutality of gladiatorial combat. No, he poured his emotions into every brushstroke, crafting a deeper, darker meaning. The Spoliarium wasn't just about the fall of a gladiator. It was a metaphor for the suffering of the Filipino people under Spanish oppression. The helpless bodies, stripped of their dignity, were not just historical figures, but a direct reflection of the exploitation and degradation suffered by the people of the Philippines. And to understand how this painting managed to capture the national sentiment, we need to look at the atmosphere in the Philippines at the time. In the late 19th century, the Philippines was under the brutal grip of Spanish colonial rule. The archipelago had been a colony of Spain for over 300 years, and during that time, Filipinos were subjected to exploitation, inequality, and harsh treatment. The country's vast wealth was drained by Spanish authorities, while the Filipino people endured extreme poverty, forced labor, and the loss of basic freedoms. Filipino nationalist movements were slowly growing, but many of these efforts were met with brutal suppression. It was a time of oppression, and the people were beginning to feel the heavy weight of colonial rule in their bones. The ruling Spanish elite controlled the economy, the military, and the clergy, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the Filipino people had no voice in their own future. Yet, amidst this darkness, art began to shine as a beacon of resistance. Writers, poets, and artists like José Rizal, Andrés Bonifacio, and Juan Luna began to use their work to voice the frustrations of their countrymen. Spoliarium was not just a painting. It was a direct challenge to the Spanish authorities, a powerful reminder of the pain and suffering that Filipinos had endured for centuries. When Juan Luna's Spoliarium was unveiled in Madrid, it did more than just win a gold medal. It ignited a spark. The emotional force of the piece was undeniable, and it resonated deeply with Filipinos both at home and abroad. The painting's portrayal of suffering, helplessness, and loss struck a chord with many, and its symbolism was not lost on the Filipino nationalist movement. Spoliarium became a visual representation of the oppression Filipinos were facing. The bodies being dragged from the arena symbolized the Filipino people, enslaved, crushed, and forgotten by the Spanish. It wasn't long before the image was used as a rallying cry for revolution. Filipino exiles, intellectuals, and reformists saw in Luna's painting not just an artistic masterpiece, but a powerful tool for change. And this shift in thinking would soon give rise to a powerful new force. In the years following the painting's release, the Philippines saw the rise of the propaganda movement, a group of intellectuals, writers, and reformists who sought to bring attention to the injustices committed by the Spanish authorities. Figures like José Rizal, Marcelo del Pilar, and Graciano López Jaena began to publish revolutionary literature that called for reforms, equality, and the rights of Filipinos under Spanish rule. The message of the propaganda movement was clear. The Spanish colonial system had to end. The reformists believed that through education, representation, and the power of the press, the Filipinos could achieve a better future. The movement's ideas, infused with the passion and symbolism of spoliarium, would soon spread among the masses. But the propaganda movement would not be enough to spark the revolution. The intellectual fervor ignited by Luna's spoliarium, and the propaganda movement eventually gave way to a more radical approach, armed resistance. Figures like Andrés Bonifacio and Emilio Aguinaldo, inspired by the injustice depicted in Luna's work, realized that peaceful reforms would not be enough to overthrow centuries of Spanish colonial rule. In 1896, the Katipunan was founded, a secret society dedicated to fighting for Philippine independence. Bonifacio, inspired by the spirit of resistance embodied in Luna's spoliarium, became a key leader in the movement. His rallying cry to his fellow Filipinos was simple: no longer should they suffer under the weight of Spanish tyranny. It was time to fight for freedom. The Katipunan quickly gained support, and on August 23, 1896, the Philippine Revolution began. The revolutionaries, armed with little more than a fierce determination and the memory of the atrocities depicted in Luna's painting, rose up against the Spanish Empire. Their first major clash came in Balintawak, and from there the revolution would only grow stronger. Spoliarium wasn't just a painting. It was a symbol of defiance. It became the visual embodiment of the suffering and resilience of the Filipino people, a beacon of hope in their struggle for independence. The painting's influence stretched far beyond the canvas, feeding the flames of the Philippine Revolution and inspiring generations of Filipinos to stand up against tyranny. Even today, Spoliarium remains one of the most iconic works of Philippine art, and it continues to be a powerful reminder of the struggles that led to the country's independence. The painting not only captured the pain of an oppressed people, but also illuminated the path to liberation. Juan Luna's Spoliarium was more than just a piece of art. It was a catalyst for revolution. Through the raw power of his painting, Luna captured the agony of the Filipino people and gave them a symbol they could rally behind. It sparked a movement that led to the Philippine Revolution, changing the course of history. And even today, more than a century later, Spoliarium continues to remind us that art has the power to change the world. Rembrandt's The Night Watch, painted in 1642, is one of the most iconic and enigmatic masterpieces of the Dutch Golden Age. At first glance, the painting might appear to be a simple depiction of an Amsterdam civic guard, yet beneath its surface, there are layers of meaning, hidden details, and even theories of political intrigue that have sparked debates among art historians for centuries. The painting depicts Captain Frans Banning Kock and his lieutenant, Willem van Ruitenburg, at the head of the Cloveniusdoelen, a group of militiamen tasked with maintaining order in Amsterdam. Unlike other portraits of military companies at the time, which were often formal, static, and lifeless, the Night Watch is anything but. The figures are in motion, suggesting a sense of urgency and drama, rather than a posed and orderly arrangement typical of similar works from the era. This dynamic composition challenges the viewer's perception, giving the painting a vitality rarely seen in civic guard portraits. The movement is palpable, as figures seem to step forward, some in full stride, while others hold weapons in action-ready stances. Rembrandt's dramatic use of light and shadow, the hallmark of his style, only amplifies this effect, casting some parts of the painting in bright light, while leaving others in deep shadow, contributing to a sense of suspense and tension. However, what truly sets the Night Watch apart from other militia paintings are its many hidden details and unusual elements. The most immediately striking of these is the figure of a young woman, often referred to as the girl with the chicken. Positioned in the lower left corner, she holds a chicken, or possibly a rooster, in her hands, a seemingly odd detail that has raised eyebrows for centuries. Art historians and critics have long speculated about the symbolism of this figure. Some believe that the girl represents a personification of the militia's banner, as chickens were often used in Dutch iconography to symbolize vigilance or protection. Others point out that chickens were sometimes linked to women of ill repute in popular culture, suggesting the possibility of a more scandalous interpretation. The woman's mysterious role in the painting has intrigued many, as she doesn't seem to fit within the context of a typical civic guard portrait. Her presence, combined with the chicken, adds an element of mystery that invites speculation about her true significance in the narrative. There is another layer of intrigue surrounding the portrayal of the figures in the painting. Many art historians argue that Rembrandt's careful use of light not only serves to highlight certain individuals, but it also reveals something more, an underlying tension. The bright spotlights cast on Captain Koch and Lieutenant van Ruytenburg give the impression that they are central to the scene, but the dynamics of the surrounding figures suggest a complex network of relationships and possible conflicts. Some suggest that the arrangement of the figures hints at an assassination plot. The most striking clue lies in the way certain militiamen stand at angles that seem to suggest they are about to draw their weapons, or that they are subtly watching the captain and his lieutenant with suspicion. These details, along with the intense expressions on some faces, give the scene an eerie undercurrent of political unease. The theme of internal strife within the Guard is further complicated by the figures' positioning and the way they interact with one another. The complex relationships among the figures might reflect the political and social tensions in Amsterdam during the 17th century. At the time, the city was in the midst of a power struggle between different factions, some supporting the central government and others backing local autonomy. The painting's seemingly spontaneous composition, with figures stepping forward and others hanging back, may be a subtle nod to the internal divisions within the civic guard and, more broadly, the fractious nature of Amsterdam's political landscape. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Night Watch is its controversial history and the impact it had on the public when it was first unveiled. Unlike other military group portraits, which were often formal commissions by wealthy civic patrons, Rembrandt's work was an unexpected departure from tradition. The painting was created for the Amsterdam Civil Guard as part of a public commission, but Rembrandt's decision to portray the militiamen in action, as opposed to posing formally, was a bold and innovative choice. The painting was not well received at first. Critics were shocked by its apparent chaos and the lack of the usual polished compositional elements associated with more traditional civic group portraits. The inclusion of hidden details, strange figures like the woman with the chicken, and the dramatic tension in the composition only fueled the controversy. Despite initial criticism, the painting quickly gained popularity due to its unique composition and its ability to captivate the viewer. The figures in the painting seem to be alive, as if caught in the middle of a moment of high drama. The use of light and shadow, with some figures emerging from the darkness while others retreat into it, creates a sense of mystery that invites the viewer to wonder about the story behind the scene. The dynamic nature of the painting, combined with the hidden details, gave the Night Watch an energy that was unmatched in its time. Rembrandt's portrayal of the civic guard as an active, almost cinematic moment in time was revolutionary, making it a landmark work in the history of art. Beyond the political and social undertones, The Night Watch is also a profound statement on the art of portraiture itself. It breaks away from the conventional norms of the genre by introducing a sense of motion and drama that was unusual for its time. Rembrandt's mastery of light and his innovative approach to composition transformed the way group portraits were viewed. His ability to elevate a simple militia portrait into a moment of high drama and intrigue has made The Night Watch one of the most celebrated works of art in history. The painting has continued to spark fascination and discussion long after its creation. Theories about its hidden meanings and symbolic details persist to this day, with new interpretations emerging as scholars continue to examine every inch of the canvas. In recent years, technological advancements such as X-ray analysis and infrared imaging have allowed art historians to uncover even more hidden layers in the painting. These modern techniques have revealed changes Rembrandt made during the painting's creation, suggesting that he reworked parts of the composition, perhaps in response to feedback or evolving ideas about how to best convey his message. Ultimately, The Night Watch is more than just a portrait of a civic guard. It is a masterful work of art that challenges our understanding of portraiture, while also offering a glimpse into the political and social tensions of 17th century Amsterdam. The hidden details, the mysterious woman with the chicken, the assassination theories, and the dramatic composition all combine to make this painting one of the most intriguing and enigmatic works in the history of art. Imagine walking into a room and being confronted by a figure, his wide grin stretching impossibly across his face. His eyes gleam with a mix of mockery and merriment. The figure stands before you, an ordinary man, yet there's something unsettling about the way he laughs. Is it real, or is there something darker hidden behind that smile? This is The Laughing Fool, a painting by Jacob Cornelis van Oostzanen, an artwork that still has us asking questions centuries after its creation. At first glance, the figure in The Laughing Fool seems to embody a carefree spirit, with his broad grin and joyful expression. But is he truly happy, or is his laughter concealing something deeper? Experts have long debated the nature of the figure. Could he be a depiction of a jester or a fool? Roles historically associated with both humor and insight. The fool, often seen as a symbol of ignorance, is paradoxically also a figure of wisdom in literature and art. The unsettling aspect of the painting lies in how this figure combines joy with a sense of emptiness, making us question the true nature of his laughter. And to understand why this painting was so impactful, we need to look at the larger context of its time. The Laughing Fool was painted during the Renaissance, a time when the fool was a recurring character in art, literature, and even daily life. In this era, the fool was not just someone who made others laugh. They often held the power to reveal truths, to speak in a way that others couldn't. They were paradoxical figures, part of a culture that was grappling with the tension between the old world and the new. So, when van Oostzanen painted this figure, was he simply reflecting the humorous elements of Renaissance life, or was he critiquing something more? To understand this, we must dive into the social context of the time. Van Oostzanen's Fool may have been more than just an entertainer. The exaggerated expression and the use of bright colors suggest a deeper psychological exploration. Some believe that the painting reflects the inner conflict of the human mind, an outward expression of joy masking a profound inner turmoil. In this sense, The fool in the painting becomes a symbol for the duality of human nature, where what we present to the world may not always match what we feel inside. But what if there's more to this painting than meets the eye? What if the painting speaks to a deeper, hidden societal critique? To uncover this, we need to look at how the laughing fool connects with the broader human experience. The fool, in many ways, mirrors society. During the Renaissance, the rise of humanism challenged old structures, but it also led to a time of social upheaval. People began questioning authority, the role of the church, and their place in the world. In the context of Van Oostzaanen's painting, could the fool be a representation of society's discontent? His exaggerated laugh might be seen as a commentary on the hollowness of societal norms, the emptiness that comes with blindly following tradition without understanding. But how did this painting, and others like it, influence later generations? To answer that, let's look at the ripple effects of this imagery. The Laughing Fool was more than just a painting. It was a part of a larger cultural movement that began to dissect human nature and societal norms. The Fool would later appear in works by other artists and writers, including Shakespeare, where the fool's role evolved into a more complex figure, one who could see the truth in a world of pretense. The idea of the laughing fool transcended the Renaissance and continued to influence how we view the fool archetype today. How did this image evolve, and what role does it play in our own understanding of humor and folly? There's an eerie quality to the painting that makes us feel uneasy. Something about the fool's laughter feels too genuine, too raw. It's as if the figure is laughing at something we cannot see or understand. And that's precisely the point. The laughing fool often embodies the concept of irrationality, the unpredictable, chaotic part of the human psyche that cannot be explained away by reason. As psychology began to evolve, this representation of the fool mirrored the growing understanding that human behavior cannot always be rationalized. There's something liberating, and at times terrifying, about the fool's role in representing what lies beneath the surface of rationality. But what happens when the fool's laughter stops? Van Oostzaanen's The Laughing Fool is more than just a quirky painting of a man with an exaggerated grin. It's a powerful commentary on the complexities of human nature. In his laugh, we see both a reflection of society's desire to mask its deeper struggles and a reminder of the folly of human existence itself. While we may never fully understand the motivations behind the figure's smile, we are left to confront the unsettling truth that sometimes the most joyful expressions conceal the deepest mysteries of all. A twisted, goat-headed figure sits at the center of a nightmarish gathering. Around him, shadowy witches and demonic creatures raise their arms in reverence or fear. This unsettling scene is the Witches' Sabbath, painted by Francisco Goya in the late 18th century. It's an image that drags you deep into a world of darkness and superstition, a world where reason struggles against fear. But what secrets lie behind this haunting masterpiece? Goya's Witches' Sabbath doesn't just depict a wild party. It reveals a terrifying ritual, one that was believed to connect witches to the devil himself, often represented by the great he-goat. For centuries, European society was gripped by panic about witchcraft and dark magic, and Goya's painting captures that anxiety in a way that still sends chills today. But Goya's relationship with this subject was complicated. He wasn't just illustrating superstition. He was exposing something deeper about human nature and the dark side of belief. Born in Spain in 1746, Francisco Goya lived through a period of intense social and political upheaval. The Enlightenment was spreading reason and science, but superstition and fear of the occult still ran wild, especially in rural Spain. Goya's art evolved from traditional court portraits to deeply disturbing scenes filled with grotesque figures and twisted nightmares. The Witch's Sabbath is part of his black painting series, a raw, dark reflection of his fears and disillusionment as he aged. At the center of the scene sits the great he-goat, a symbol with ancient roots. Goats were long linked to fertility, but also to the devil in Christian iconography. The great he-goat was thought to be the devil's earthly form during witches' gatherings, presiding over ceremonies where witches pledged their loyalty in exchange for power. Goya paints him with eerie calm and a knowing gaze. Not just a monster, but a figure embodying both fear and fascination. The witches around him are no innocent bystanders, their faces contorted in ecstasy, horror, or madness. Each witch holds a story, victims of persecution, lonely outcasts, or symbols of the repressed fears of society. Goya blurs the line between human and beast, sanity and madness, reality and nightmare. This painting is as much about human psychology as it is about witches and demons. It asks us, what happens when fear becomes a force that consumes reason? Goya's Witch's Sabbath wasn't meant to be a comforting scene. Instead, it confronts viewers with the darkness lurking beneath the surface of civilization. The stark blacks and greys, the shadowy figures barely visible against the night. It all builds a suffocating atmosphere of dread. This wasn't just a painting, it was a warning. And yet, there's a strange magnetism here, drawing us in even as it repels. But this painting was only part of Goya's grim exploration of superstition. Before we dive deeper, it's worth noting that the witch hunts that terrified Europe had largely died down by Goya's time. Yet superstition lingered in the popular imagination, especially in rural areas where old beliefs clashed with modern ideas. Goya's depiction is a late echo of that dark age, a grim reminder of the cruelty and paranoia that once ruled. But what inspired Goya to turn to such unsettling themes when he could have painted royal portraits? The answer lies in Goya's own experiences. As he grew older, he suffered from illness and deafness, isolating him from the world around him. His health and personal losses pushed him into a shadowy mental space where nightmares bled into reality. The black paintings, including Witch's Sabbath, were painted directly on the walls of his home, a private diary of his darkest thoughts. This wasn't art for public display. It was a glimpse into the artist's tortured soul. Goya's work would later inspire countless artists and writers fascinated by the macabre and mysterious. His depiction of witches was no mere fantasy. It shaped how the dark arts were imagined for generations. Yet the Witch's Sabbath also forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Who were the real monsters? The witches themselves, or the society that hunted them? Goya's painting gives form to the shadows of both. As the great he-goat presides over this gathering, we can't help but wonder, what does it mean to worship fear itself? This painting pulls us into an ancient dance of power, superstition, and human vulnerability. And just when you think you understand the scene, you realize that Goya left so many details deliberately ambiguous. Why is the goat so calm? What are the witches whispering? The answers might be darker than you expect. In the centuries since its creation, Witch's Sabbath has become one of Goya's most iconic and disturbing works. It captures a moment where history, mythology, and personal torment collide, and its influence echoes not just in art, but in how we view fear and the unknown. The great he-goat remains a symbol of the shadow side of humanity, a reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't monsters, but the fears we project onto them. So the next time you see a witch or a demon in art, remember Goya's Witches' Sabbath. It's not just a painting of witches, it's a portrait of our own darkest fears and the fragile line between belief and madness. A man and a woman stand in a dimly lit room. He wears a dark robe with fur trim. She's draped in a heavy green gown. Between them, their hands barely touch. At their feet, a small dog stares directly at you. Behind them, a mirror reflects not just the couple, but two other figures watching from the doorway. Above, a single candle burns in broad daylight. This isn't just a portrait, it's a puzzle. Painted in 1434 by Jan van Eyck, the Arnolfini portrait is one of the most analysed and most misunderstood paintings in Western art. For nearly 600 years, scholars have debated its meaning. Is it a wedding, a memorial, a legal document, or something else entirely? To start unravelling this mystery, we need to look closer, much closer. At first glance, the mirror behind the couple might seem like a decorative touch, but look again. Its convex surface reflects the entire room, and two unexpected guests. One of them might be Van Eyck himself. Around the mirror's frame are 10 tiny medallions, each depicting a scene from the Passion of Christ. These aren't just religious symbols, they're clues. Some art historians believe the mirror represents the eye of God, witnessing the event unfolding in the room. Others suggest it serves as legal evidence, capturing the presence of witnesses required for a marriage contract. But if this is a wedding, why does the woman appear so solemn? And why is only one candle lit in the chandelier above? Above the couple hangs an ornate chandelier with 6 branches, yet only one candle is lit, and it's positioned above the man. The rest are extinguished. In Christian symbolism, a burning candle often represents the presence of God or the soul's vitality. Some scholars interpret the single lit candle as a sign that the man is alive, while the extinguished ones suggest the woman has passed away. This theory gains traction when considering that the woman's name, Costanza Trenta, is believed to have died a year before the painting was completed. Could this portrait be a memorial, capturing a moment that never truly happened? At the couple's feet sits a small, fluffy dog. In 15th century art, dogs often symbolize loyalty and fidelity, but there's more to this canine companion. Some researchers point out that dogs were commonly depicted at the feet of women in tomb effigies, symbolizing their passage into the afterlife. This detail supports the theory that the woman in the portrait is deceased, and the painting serves as a tribute to her memory. Yet, the dog's alert gaze and lifelike presence add another layer of complexity. Is it a symbol of enduring love, or a silent witness to a moment frozen in time? The woman's voluminous green dress is striking, leading many to assume she is pregnant. However, fashion historians argue that the style was typical of the era, designed to showcase wealth and status. Green, in this context, symbolizes hope and fertility. The folds of the dress are meticulously painted, emphasizing the richness of the fabric. Her attire, along with the elaborate furnishings in the room, underscores the couple's affluence. But if the woman is indeed deceased, could the green gown represent a longing for life or a hope that transcends mortality? Scattered on the windowsill and chest are several oranges, an unusual sight in 15th century Bruges. Oranges were expensive imports, often associated with wealth and fertility. The open window allows light to flood the room, illuminating the couple and their surroundings. This interplay of light and shadow showcases Van Eyck's mastery of oil painting, a relatively new medium at the time. The presence of the oranges and the open window could symbolize the couple's openness to the world, their prosperity, or perhaps a connection between the earthly and the divine. Above the mirror, Van Eyck inscribed, Johannes de Eyck fuit hic 1534. Jan van Eyck was here. This bold signature suggests the artist's direct involvement in the scene. Some interpret this as Van Eyck acting as a witness to the event, further supporting the theory that the painting serves as a legal document. Others see it as a statement of artistic presence, blurring the lines between observer and participant. This self-referential touch adds another layer to the painting's complexity, inviting viewers to question the nature of reality and representation. The Arnolfini portrait is more than a depiction of a couple in a room. It's a masterclass in symbolism, a testament to Van Eyck's skill, and a canvas that continues to captivate and confound. Every detail, from the mirror's reflection to the dog's gaze, invites interpretation. Is it a wedding, a memorial, or a legal record? Perhaps it's all of these or none. What remains clear is that Van Eyck crafted a work that transcends time, inviting each generation to find its own meaning within the layers of paint and symbolism. And maybe that's the true genius of this mysterious masterpiece. A jester sits alone under candlelight. His robes are crimson, his posture sunken. Behind him, the noise of a royal ball fills the palace with music, laughter and cheer. But his eyes are locked on a crumpled letter in his hand, a letter that has just shattered him. The year's 1514. The Kingdom of Poland has just lost Smolensk to the Grand Duchy of Moscow. The nobles celebrate, but Stanchik, the court jester, knows the truth. He's the only one in the entire room who seems to grasp the gravity of what just happened. And yet, he's just a fool. But how did a jester become the moral compass of an entire kingdom? And why has this silent, brooding painting haunted Polish history for over a century? To understand that, we have to go back. Stanchik was a real person, or at least he might have been. Polish records from the 16th century mention a court jester by that name, a sharp-witted satirist who served under 3 Polish kings. He wasn't just a comic relief figure in brightly colored clothes. Stanchik was a thinker, a critic, a truth-teller hidden behind bells and sarcasm. In a time when monarchs surrounded themselves with flatterers and yes-men, Stanchik said the things no one else dared to. But what's most fascinating? He didn't do it through rebellion. He did it through jokes. Think of it this way. In a medieval court, if a general questioned the king's decisions, he might be executed. But if a jester mocked the same decision with clever wordplay, people laughed. The truth got through. That made Stanchik dangerous and invaluable. But that's just the man. What about the painting? That's where things take an even stranger turn. Because in Jan Matejko's Stanchik, painted in 1862, the jester isn't telling jokes. He isn't laughing. He isn't even speaking. He's mourning. So why paint a jester this way? And why did Matejko place a comet in the sky? That part's next. And it opens a window into something most viewers never notice. The setting is a masquerade ball. Nobles dance in the background. Their faces are veiled. Their joy is exaggerated. It feels unreal, deliberately hollow. Meanwhile, Stanchik sits in the foreground, isolated in a darkened chamber. The party is just through the open door, but he's not part of it. Not mentally, not emotionally. He's somewhere else entirely. In his hand, a letter announcing the fall of Smolensk, a major fortress city captured by enemies, a national loss, and outside the window, a comet streaks across the sky. In medieval Europe, comets were more than celestial events. They were omens, portents of doom. Their appearance often coincided with wars, disasters, or deaths of kings. People feared them. So when Matejko added that comet into the painting, he wasn't just decorating the sky, he was sounding an alarm. Stanchik, staring at the letter, is the only one who understands the significance of what just happened. The nobles, too busy drinking wine and dancing to care. The kingdom just lost a critical city, but no one seems to notice. And this is where the painting transforms into something far more than just historical fiction. Because Matejko wasn't just talking about 1514, he was talking about his own time. When Jan Matejko painted Stanchik, Poland no longer existed on the map. In the late 1700s, it had been partitioned, sliced up and absorbed by Russia, Prussia, and Austria. For nearly 120 years, there was no independent Poland, just the memory of one. Matejko, born in 1838, grew up in this limbo, and he used art to fight back. But instead of painting bloody uprisings or battle scenes, he did something smarter. He painted memory. By resurrecting powerful moments from Polish history, moments like the fall of Smolensk, Matejko reminded his fellow countrymen of what was lost and what needed to be reclaimed. In Stanchik, the jester becomes a stand-in for every Pole who understood the cost of silence. He sees the danger ahead, he sees the collapse, and he watches, helpless, as the people around him party through the beginning of their own downfall. The painting, then, is a trap. It lures you in with color and composition, and then drops you into despair. But it also raises an eerie question. If Stanchik saw it coming, did anyone listen? Throughout history, the figure of the fool or jester has always held a strange duality. Outwardly, they were entertainers, meant to amuse the court, break tension, and lighten heavy topics. But behind the jokes was often someone smarter than the entire room combined. In Shakespeare's plays, fools often speak the deepest truths. In King Lear, it's the fool who tells the king he's made a terrible mistake, while everyone else stays silent. Stanchik fits into that tradition perfectly. He's a character who understands politics, war, diplomacy, and the fragility of power. He's more of a historian than a clown, and in Matejko's painting, he's more prophet than man. The letter in his hand doesn't just symbolize the fall of Smolensk. It symbolizes foresight. And foresight, in a world that refuses to listen, is a curse. Because what good is knowing the truth if no one else cares? This opens up one of the painting's most unsettling ideas. What if the wisest man in the kingdom was the one with the least power? And more disturbingly, what if we're all dancing in the background, ignoring our own letters? That metaphor becomes even more powerful when you learn what Stanchik said in real life. Some quotes attributed to Stanchik have survived for centuries. One of the most famous is, "The king is wise, but the court is foolish." Another, "He who laughs last thinks slowest, but the one that hits hardest. When the people are silent, even fools seem wise." These weren't just jokes. They were loaded grenades of truth, disguised as clever lines. Stanchik had mastered the art of using humor to criticize power. He once publicly mocked a royal advisor's disastrous plan by suggesting the kingdom should build ships on dry land. Everyone laughed, but they also understood exactly what he meant. He wasn't trying to be funny. He was trying to be heard. And that's what makes Mateko's painting so tragic. The man who spent his life using laughter as a weapon has stopped laughing, because sometimes the situation is beyond satire. Stańczyk became one of the most iconic Polish paintings ever made, not just because of its technical brilliance, but because of what it represented. For a nation stripped of its sovereignty, Stańczyk became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even when the country was gone, the conscience remained. Schools studied it, revolutionaries referenced it, writers and poets drew inspiration from it. In 1918, when Poland regained independence after World War I, many credited not just soldiers, but artists like Matejko for keeping the flame alive. And yet, the painting still speaks today. In a world full of noise, distraction and spectacle, the idea of a lone figure quietly realizing what's being lost feels eerily familiar. Maybe that's why Stańczyk has outlived every government that once tried to erase the country it mourned. Because truth doesn't need a crown. It just needs someone willing to see clearly, especially when no one else does. In the end, Stańczyk isn't really about a jester. It's about awareness, isolation, the weight of knowing something that others refuse to face. And it's about what happens when the voice of reason is dressed like a fool, ignored, laughed at, and left alone in a candlelit room while the music keeps playing. But every time we look at that painting, we're not at the party. We're sitting beside him. And for a moment, we understand exactly what it means to carry the truth in silence. A boy leans in, wide-eyed. A girl recoils, shielding her face in horror. The bird inside the glass chamber flutters violently, gasping for air, slowly suffocating. Around the table, a scientist watches, calm and collected. Not sadistic, just curious. This isn't a scene from a horror film. This is a painting. An experiment on a bird in the air pump, painted in 1768, captures one of the most chilling moments in the history of art. Not because of gore or darkness, but because of what it says about us. Our need to know, our appetite for spectacle, and the exact moment the age of reason collided with the cost of progress. But to understand what exactly is going on here, and why it shook people so deeply, we have to look closer. Much closer. At first glance, the painting is chaos frozen in time. There's a bird in a glass container, and someone is literally sucking the air out of it. That's not metaphor, it's science. Or at least, what passed for science in the 18th century. The man standing beside the air pump is probably a traveling showman, a natural philosopher, demonstrating the effects of vacuum pressure by removing air from the chamber with the bird trapped inside. As oxygen vanishes, the bird suffocates. And the reactions around the room, they're a symphony of human emotion, horror, wonder, indifference, even flirtation. Yes, one couple sits totally detached, locked in flirtatious eye contact, like they're at a dinner party, not a live demonstration of animal asphyxiation. That's not an accident. This painting isn't just about science. It's about how people react when faced with truth, or worse, when they become desensitized to it. And the reason people reacted so strongly to this painting when it first appeared, well, that comes down to the air pump itself. In the 1600s, air pumps were revolutionary. They allowed scientists to prove that air had weight, that vacuums could exist, and that life required oxygen. Robert Boyle, one of the founding fathers of modern chemistry, used one to demonstrate all of this. He even killed a few birds in the process, again, in the name of science. By the time Joseph Wright painted this scene, these experiments had become public spectacles. People paid to watch them. It was science as theatre, and the air pump became a kind of stage prop. But here's the eerie part. Joseph Wright doesn't paint the air pump as a tool. He paints it as a kind of altar. The entire room is lit by a single ghostly candle trapped inside a glass flask, like the fragile light of reason surrounded by darkness. And at the center of it all is a man, not unlike a priest, holding life and death in his hands. This was the age of enlightenment. Reason was supposed to replace religion. But in this painting, science starts to look like its own belief system, with its own rituals, sacrifices, and victims. But the deeper message, that depends on who you see yourself as in the room. There are 12 people in the painting, but only 6 have clear reactions. Each one reflects a different emotional response to progress. There's the young girl turning away in distress. She's the voice of empathy, refusing to accept that knowledge should come at any cost. Her younger sister hides behind her, innocent and confused. Then there's the teenage boy, leaning in. Not horrified, just curious. The scientist, cold, composed, almost hypnotic. He's not evil, just detached. The old man in the shadows looks on, contemplative, maybe remembering a time before all this. And the couple in love. They're tuned out, distracted. Proof that even during pivotal moments, people still find time to flirt. Each face is a mirror. Who you notice first says something about you. And that's what makes this painting so powerful. It doesn't tell you what to think. It makes you choose. But there's one element in the painting that doesn't seem to belong. A skull hiding in plain sight. Look closely at the lower left corner. Just beneath the table, half hidden in the shadows, is a bird cage, and next to it, a human skull. Why is it there? Art historians have debated this for years. Some say it's a memento mori, a symbolic reminder of death, often placed in paintings to provoke existential reflection. It tells the viewer, life is fragile, time is short. But in this context, the skull does more than that. It connects the dying bird to a broader idea, that progress, even rational progress, has a cost. And that cost isn't always measured in data or discovery. It's measured in lives. The skull stares out from the shadows like a ghost of past knowledge, something we sacrificed along the way. And it's not the only ghost in the room. In the 1700s, public science demonstrations were a form of entertainment. These weren't private academic seminars. They were live shows, often held in taverns, theaters, even private homes. Demonstrators like the one in this painting traveled from town to town, performing tricks with electricity, chemistry, and yes, vacuum chambers. They would sometimes revive the birds afterward, letting fresh air rush back in, causing the creature to flutter back to life. But not always. And that uncertainty, the gamble between death and resurrection, was part of the thrill. It was like watching a magic act, but one where the magician was experimenting with actual life and death. There were no trapdoors, no illusions. This blurred the line between scientific inquiry and public spectacle. And Wright captures that tension perfectly. The painting isn't a celebration, it's a question. And it's a question we still ask today. When the painting was first unveiled, it disturbed viewers, not just because of what it showed, but because of what it implied. That humanity's pursuit of truth might come at the expense of something deeper, compassion, empathy, innocence. That maybe, just maybe, there's a dark side to progress. The Enlightenment gave us incredible tools, the scientific method, modern medicine, engines, electricity. But it also gave us the power to manipulate life, to play God in laboratories. And today, with AI, genetic engineering, and climate manipulation on the table, the question posed by Wright's painting is more relevant than ever. Are we the curious boy, the detached couple, the horrified child, or the man pulling the lever? Because no matter how much we learn, the cost of that learning often falls on those who have no say, the voiceless, like the bird in the air pump. Joseph Wright never told us what happened to the bird, whether it lived or died, and that ambiguity is the painting's most haunting detail, because it puts the responsibility on us to decide not just what we're seeing, but what kind of world we want to live in. A world of light and knowledge, or one where curiosity comes with a silent price. Maybe that's the true experiment here, and we're the ones being tested. A skull stares back at you, grinning wide, a smouldering cigarette clenched between his bony teeth. It's an image so unusual that it almost feels like a joke. Painted by Vincent van Gogh, one of history's most celebrated artists, this eerie and oddly humorous portrait wasn't meant as a macabre statement, but rather as a sharp, almost sarcastic commentary from a young artist still learning his craft. Van Gogh created Skull of a Skeleton with Burning Cigarette around 1885 or 1886, during his time at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Antwerp. This was a period where he was intensely focused on mastering anatomy and the human form. Yet instead of a proud depiction of muscles and flesh, we get this stark skeleton puffing on a cigarette as if mocking the seriousness of his lessons. The painting wasn't meant for public display. Some art historians believe it was Van Gogh's witty response to the tedious nature of anatomy classes, where students were forced to study dead bodies to learn how to paint living ones. By showing a skeleton smoking, Van Gogh might have been saying something about mortality, the absurdity of life, or simply having a bit of rebellious fun with the grim subject matter. But what's truly fascinating is how this small, almost humorous work fits into Van Gogh's larger journey. At this point, Van Gogh was struggling, emotionally and artistically. He was far from the confident, vibrant artist we recognize today. His palette was dark and muted, his mood often bleak. And yet, this skull painting hints at a darker humor beneath the surface, a playful defiance that foreshadows the raw intensity of his later works. The cigarette itself is a curious detail. Smoking was common at the time, but by putting a burning cigarette in a skull's mouth, Van Gogh adds a sense of life to death, or death to life. It creates a paradox that's both unsettling and oddly alive, blurring the line between decay and vitality. It's almost like the skull is saying, I'm still here, I'm still kicking, even if I'm just bones. Some have even speculated that the painting comments on the dangers of smoking, especially in the 19th century when tobacco use was on the rise, but the health consequences weren't widely understood. Was Van Gogh warning us about the slow burn of cigarettes? Or was it just a cheeky image with no deep message at all? The mystery only adds to the painting's intrigue, but this painting also opens up a larger conversation about how artists have historically used skulls and skeletons to explore themes of mortality, vanity, and the fleeting nature of life. Van Gogh was tapping into a centuries-old tradition called memento mori, a reminder that death comes for us all, and yet his version feels less solemn and more irreverent, challenging viewers to confront death with a smirk rather than fear. And what happened to this skull painting after Van Gogh's death? Unlike his famous sunflowers or starry nights, Skull of a Skeleton with Burning Cigarette stayed relatively obscure for decades. It wasn't until the 20th century when the world began re-examining Van Gogh's entire body of work that this quirky little painting gained appreciation for its unique blend of humor, mortality, and artistic skill. Today, the painting resides in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, where it continues to puzzle and delight visitors. It's a reminder that even the darkest subjects can be approached with wit, and that Van Gogh, despite his tragic life, had moments of lightness and irony woven into his art. So the next time you see a skull, don't just think about death. Think about the stories it can tell. Stories of rebellion, humor, and unexpected life in the face of decay. Van Gogh's Skull of a Skeleton with Burning Cigarette isn't just a skeleton. It's a bold statement from an artist who dared to laugh at the end.